So unless you've been living under a rock, you might have heard that Bill Gates and Melinda Gates have decided to get a divorce. Furthermore, unless you've been really living under a rock, you probably know who Bill Gates is. Whatever you think about the guy, good or bad, he's kind of an iconic figure for a variety of reasons. He's the founder of Microsoft. Microsoft to this day dominates virtually everything and anything because they're slowly taking over every aspect of the electronics venue. And he's famous for his charities and so on and so forth. He's a famous guy. And I think it's important to talk about this not because I think as the title implies, the divorce of Bill Gates is relevant to him, or that even people in his category of wealth can get divorced. They do. It happens. But it's important to point out the differences here. So let's start with Bill Gates' net worth. As far as I could tell, based on research, he's worth a little bit upwards of $130 billion. That is a single man, one human being, worth that amount of money. Now, let's take into account another reality of your average man in the United States, and the average income, yearly income, annual income of a man in the United States is a little bit north of $53,000 a year. So let's just say $53,000 versus $130 billion. So right at the outset, we see there's a profound difference between your average guy and Bill Gates. And what sort of impact this difference has is really massive. So for example, we don't exactly know the reasons for their divorce. This has not been explained to us, but it doesn't matter. Even if Melinda Gates were to get fully half his money, he would still have $65 billion of money to himself. The guy's not going to starve. Quite the opposite. When you have that much money, a lot of things cease to be meaningful in terms of what you can or cannot afford. Him losing $65 billion will not hinder his ability to purchase a home or a car or another Xbox or do proper grocery shopping. But if we compare and contrast that with a guy who's only earning $53,000, well, frankly speaking, losing half his income, which he may or may not, could potentially be devastating. Let's say he doesn't even lose half his income, but he loses a significant chunk. Let's say he's reduced to $30,000 a year due to alimony payments. That is a massive difference, because losing $20,000 if you're only making $53,000 is not analogous to losing half your wealth if you have $130 billion. Because going from $53,000 to $30,000 is roughly 40%, give or take, of your income disappearing. So it's less than what's happening to a potential Bill Gates figure. But the impact in terms of purchasing power, the effect it has on your daily life, it is just astronomically different. Because as I mentioned before, Bill Gates would not be hindered or hampered in any way in what he wants to purchase. But the guy who's lost 40% of his income, well, frankly speaking, he will have to give consideration to his groceries, what sort of car he drives, the home he lives in or rents. It's not even apples and oranges. It's more like apples and ostrich steak. They have nothing to do with each other apart from the fact that food is involved. In the same sense, money is involved. The differences are critical. That's number one. Number two is when you have that amount of money, and in particular influence, the kinds of arrangements you make and reach in the context of a divorce are going to be vastly different from the kinds of arrangements as an average guy, as an average Joe. As an average guy and average Joe of average financial means, you are much, much more likely to be at the mercy of a public court that can decide things that you have zero impact on or influence on. And you will have to follow through on the mandates of that court. Who knows exactly what Bill and Melinda Gates have negotiated for the sake of their divorce, but I guarantee you it's going to be, by its very nature, by the nature of their status and their wealth, much more amiable and much more easygoing on a guy like Bill Gates than anything an average guy would experience in a divorce court. And so once again, apples and ostrich steaks, the two are not comparable whatsoever. Sure, we can point out that even people of Bill Gates' status and wealth get divorced. It happens to everybody. But we have to talk about the differential impact. Even for somebody who is quote-unquote poor compared to Bill Gates, such as a Hollywood star who might only, in air quotes, be worth $100 or $200 million, even if an ex-wife in that context gets half, there's not going to be a huge change to the lifestyle, although the courts might have more impact. A super heavy hitter, such as Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, I'm not saying they're outside of the law, but I almost certain they have a lot more influence on the outcomes of things. And because the wives involved know what the stakes are, they're probably much more willing to negotiate, and they're going to be a lot less harsh and draconian when it comes to the divorce settlement. Whereas in a much more average marriage, you're probably likely to encounter a woman who potentially might want to bleed you dry, is excessively vindictive, etc. And the court, whether it wants to or not, through its mandate, will enable that vindictiveness, and you end up in a really rough spot. Now, final point, I don't think it really matters in the case of Bill Gates with respect to children, although the children are grown up by now, more or less. They're in their 20s, one's 18 years old. But theoretically, had there been a divorce much earlier, I don't think there would have been this huge issue of visitation. There would have been some amiable arrangement made. Again, with wealth and status and power of that magnitude comes a lot of influence. But the same scenario could not be predicted for some guy who's working an average job, earning an average amount of money, who then needs to interact with the court system, and he probably will end up in a bad way. He will become like 90% plus of the fathers who only have visitation rights at best. And so it's important to look at these things in a nuanced way. And that's why I say it doesn't matter whether or not a Bill Gates gets divorced or married or anything in between. These guys are living on a different plane of existence. But your divorce, potential divorce, should you get married, matters a lot because the stakes are so much higher. Because most people are average. So they have access to average amounts of money. And they only have access to a limited amount of influence on the outcomes of these things. Again, if you're an average guy who gets married and you are subject to the court system, you could lose your children, you could lose substantially more money than Bill Gates, even if it's, say, only 20 or 30% of your income in terms of alimony. So the lesson to be learned here, I think, in the final analysis, is not whether or not Bill Gates getting divorced is a good indication of anything, because it doesn't matter for him one way or another. But whether or not, for most men, practically speaking, live in a different dimension compared to a Bill Gates, whether or not it's relevant to them. And yes, it is. Because if you're an average guy in the United States and you get divorced, you could potentially lose almost everything, and you might never build it back up again. Whereas a Bill Gates, should he really want to, could take half of what he still has, $65 billion, make some investments, figure something out, and make it again. It's not a big deal. But yes, of course, it certainly serves as a warning that even the likes of a Bill Gates can get divorced. But it's very important to bear in mind the differences between people like Bill Gates and the rest of us. He is living on a different plane of existence. The rest of us are not. And should you ever decide to get married, particularly in an Anglo-Saxon context, which is to say an English-speaking country, then this awareness should be borne in mind going forward. And frankly speaking, I would not recommend to you to get married at any point in time because you're probably not Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. Just a guess. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. As always, please hit the like button, hit the sub button, hit the bell icon to be informed of forthcoming videos. Share the video. As always, if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. May the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.